Hi Fact TV, it's nice to be here. I'm Pinch, this is Martin Clark, aka Blackdown.
Brilliant.
And we're here to enthrall and entertain you with our wise words.
What he said. I remember being in third bass with you, probably in about 2005 or some very early 2006, early DMZs, and you explaining how you were just deliberately reinvesting the money. If there was any money off the vinyl release, it went straight back into Tectonic, and how important it was to you that it looped back in rather than being, I don't know, whatever, used for beer or clubs or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I guess I've kind of had that, I always had that from even when I started doing the nights. Before that, it was kind of like, if you can start building up a little bit of cash from it and keep it to one side, then you can start putting on bigger nights, and then you can start making things grow. So I don't know, I guess maybe that also fell into the label side of things a little bit as well.
I mean, that sounds like good business sense, but I almost remember, sorry to quote you from like 7 years ago, but it felt like almost as well that it emotionally felt right, that because that money had come from a positive experience of the music, of releasing it, it felt right to put it back into releasing other music. Like, so not just the accountancy, but like the feeling of it, like that was the right thing to do. I thought it was quite cool.
But it was definitely simpler back then when it was a new thing, and just as it started emerging, you could put out some records, and the records themselves might, the first couple took a little while to build things up maybe, but then you had a little bit of a buzz around things, and you didn't have to engage in more complicated aspects of running a label. And I mean, this is sort of pre-digital days as well, before anyone even said the word metadata or anything like that to me. So I don't know. I'd say, what do you reckon? I mean, do you find it's come easier as time's come along, or is it?
It's harder. I mean, I think, well, running a label's got easier because you get more organised. Yeah. And it's not very exciting to talk about it, but it's just like somebody's got to be a bit organised and say, I need a bunch of these things in a supply chain, and they have to you have to have, a designer and a manufacturer and a distributor, and you need a PR team, and you need someone who vaguely knows about social media, and you don't want to rethink every one of those steps every time you put a record out. So that gets easier, but it's got harder to put out records because less and less people buy them, and less people buy music in general, which is not news, but that's just kind of how things have changed since then. You're talking about making money off actual vinyl. It's just that era is long since gone, or unless you're an artist of like a really certain standard already.
Well, I think now there's certain kinds of music which does still sell on vinyl, but the overall general thing is that it's hard to sell music generally on vinyl, but then at the same time there's certain kinds of music with certain fans and followers that are more vinyl loyal than other aspects. So even like the bigger dubstep thing, I mean, dubstep was always quite vinyl associated, and in more recent years, bigger artists aren't necessarily selling so much in terms of vinyl units, maybe are in digital and other aspects. But then there's things that connect with the world of techno and that side of things, I think still have a fairly loyal vinyl base. I mean, it's still peanuts in the grand scheme of things, and when you talk to people who were running labels sort of 15, 20 years ago, and they could put out any old junk and sell 5,000 to 10,000 units, and you go like,
I mean, I think
I'd love those days to come back.
One of the things that probably applies to both of us is just that I would probably assume that neither of us did really do it because of the money. If there was money from it, you reinvested it to make it keep going. But now, when there isn't, on one hand it might be frustrating, but primarily it's just liberating, because this is not a thing that you'd be bothering doing if you only cared about money. So more of a labour of love because you care about records, or even just about physical product.
Definitely, and I think you can probably see there's probably a little bit of a repetitive pattern with these things, in terms of a new subgenre of dance music gets established, then all of a sudden loads of people pile onto it, and it starts becoming something that people can make some money out of, and then eventually it's sort of there's too many people doing it, and then all of a sudden there's too many labels for all the buying public to support everything, so eventually it just starts falling apart, and then the guys who are in it because they're in it for the music, they're still there, and so the whole thing starts building up again. But
there were a couple of people that were quite influential in helping me start Keysound, and you were definitely one of them. I remember very clearly on a phone conversation saying, Martin, you don't want to distribute yourself. I was like, really? Well, I mean, you know, just getting records into a shop, how hard it can be. And I remember you explaining to me the logistics of like being at the centre point of records going all over the world with billing relationships. It's just, yeah, I was like, okay, Rob, yeah, I get it. I need a distributor, thank you. And so I'm grateful for that, because otherwise I would have found out the hard way. Yeah.
I guess actually, I mean, you know, there's something to be said for going the other way around now. I mean, we've got so many, so many independent record shops that have shut over the last 3-4 years because they just can't maintain things. So what's happened is you've got these kind of bigger outlets and everything kind of goes through to them. So actually it's kind of becoming probably easier now to distribute your own records, and ultimately though, really, you know, what everyone wants is to have a situation where you can sell records direct straight to your fan base and you make all the money, you know. You put out a record, it costs £7 in the shops, it's £3.50 to the shops, it's £2.50 from the distributor, and that's what you get. And then you split, take your manufacturing out, £1.50, you've got £1 to split between you and the artist. Everyone else is making money, and you know, ultimately what you want is a simple, small, loyal fan base. Buy 300 records straight from you direct, £6-7 a pop, bang, easy.
It's great.
Well, I always saw as the, you know, especially in the early years, the whole dubstep thing felt like a bit of a community thing. You know, it wasn't. I mean, it sounds kind of cheesy to talk about it like that, but extended family or whatever you want to call it. It was, you know, a bunch of people with similar interests, not making any money at the time, just doing it because it felt right, and god damn it, we're bored of everything else that was out there at the time. So you've got to kind of push on with what you believe in.
The start of Keysound was quite different though. I think ours was, like many labels, I guess, born out of kind of frustration or lack of opportunity. So that kind of DIY spirit of like, no one's going to do it for you, do it yourself. And we were inspired by other labels, but our productions weren't being signed by them. And so finally we were like, well, we think we've got to a certain standard, we're just going to do it ourselves. And an opportunity also came through you to an introduction to a distributor, and we, you know, we took it. And so I think the first 8-9 releases are all just about an outlet for me and Dusk's music, because we you know, that was the only way it was going to come out, and we wanted to release music that we were making. So it's kind of a DIY thing. And then after Margin's music, I think we wanted time just to regroup and rebuild and start writing what became Dasaflex. And something just went in my head of like, okay, we had this aesthetic for the label about London, about the communities and the influences around, so maybe we can expand that to involve other people, because it's like a community thing. And you know, started to nudge with things like the Genius record and with the Starkey records. Like, okay, well, Starkey's not from London, but like he really connects with grime, which is from London, and trying to edge that outwards. And I just absolutely love it. It's just, you know, it's just been the most fun things to try and find these interconnections and try and bring through people who perhaps not being heard otherwise. Or yeah, it's been amazing.
People talk about like kind of you know, scenes and localized scenes, but I don't think we really live in a time where that's as true as it would have been 10-15 years ago. And anyone and everyone can connect through the internet now, and people do, and you know, you can find these little niche pockets in crazy places like Japan and China and just all over the world where they get it, they really get it. There might not be many of them there, but they feel part of it and they feel an affinity with it. And I don't think it's like it used to be when, you know, the music was, underground music was only being disseminated through pirate radio stations and gigs where you'd have to live somewhere to really get a flavour for it.